Hi, this is Andrew Sears, and I'm here today with John Frank, who is the author of the textbook that you're using in City Vision's Fundraising 101 course. He also has presented several other lectures in the course, and today he's going to be giving an overview of a lot of the key concepts that are covered in the course and really connecting that with practical experience. So, John, you've been doing development for how long and development consulting for how long?
Well, I've been in development, I think about 37, 38 years, and it was about 30 years of consulting and develop these tools because we're going to really talk about tools today, or we're going to talk about development 101 in the context of tools and really develop these with clients as I solved problems and then thought about how can we use this tool to simplify and make it usable for the client. And that's how I developed them.
Yeah, that's great. And how many organizations have you worked with over the years? I know it's quite a few. It's probably hard for you to remember the exact number, but roughly.
It actually is. I probably in the 75 to 100 range.
Yeah.
There are some years I'd have 10 to 12 clients. Others there might be just three or four for a period of time. But through the years, quite a few.
Yeah, and John, I feel like is kind of at the center of our values. He has a ton of experience. He's very practical in what he does. He works a lot with ministry, so he can do the Christian integration. Did his doctoral program on development, and has a lot of experience. So thank you, John, for being willing to share. So if you want to just jump into your presentation and start sharing your screen, then you can go ahead and do that now. And we really appreciate you sharing today.
Glad to be here. Glad to do it. Okay, are we there?
Yep,
All right. Well, let's jump right in. Oh, let's see. Well, I'm not at the right place.
there
There
you
we
go.
go. It just delayed a second. This is an overview slide of what I call development strategic planning by relationships. I was working for years, struggled a little bit with the word fundraising. Is that just getting money from people, or do we really care about them as stewards? And do we really, my definition of development is creating opportunities to connect God's people to God's work. Well, I came up with the question: how do we do that? Is it just fundraising strategies, just letters, just asking, just this? How do we really look at the relationship with a Christian or someone who wants to please God with their stewardship? So this is what I came up with. Moving from left to right, first of all, development is integrated with the organizational vision. In other words, it's not just about development saying, oh, let's raise money for this. It's about where is God leading the mission and vision of the organization. That is the priority. And then you say, okay, let's say in that growth of this organization, we're going to move from a budget of $100,000 to $500,000 over the next period of time. Could be 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. Then you say, well, what does development have to look like to do that? The age old, well, let's just squeeze more blood out of the same turnip. No, it doesn't work. You can't raise more money doing the same things. So I started looking at, well, what are the main relationships that we work with? And if you go over two columns, you'll see major donor strategies, core donor, which are monthly, repetitive donors, impulse donors, which I'll define, and then new donors, acquiring them. And I said, well, how do we find those? Well, we have to do donor research. We have to get to know who our people are on our list. We then have to segment them. In other words, divide them into who they are and how they respond. And then we have to create a strategy by that target segment. Now, in a couple more slides, I'll go in more detail of the characteristics of each one of those four groups. But when you put those together, what do you have? You have a comprehensive, integrated strategy. In other words, if we believe from Deuteronomy that each of you should give in proportion to the way that the Lord your God has blessed you, okay, out of Deuteronomy, we know that major donors, that people that give more, might be able to give more, and maybe in God's eyes should give more. Now, I'm not making judgments here. I'm just basing it on that principle. We look at some people, they're better off budgeting a little bit every month. Those are core donors. Impulse donors, they don't plan. Okay, we'll get, and then new donors. So what I'm saying in a comprehensive integrated strategy is to try to have some strategy, at least one for each one of these relationships. Now here's the big aha, and you should remember this from the whole course. One size does not fit all. One size does not fit all. If you're doing the same strategy with every one of relationships, you're leaving people out, you're leaving people behind, you're offending people, and you're just not raising as much funding if in relationships. So remember that. That is an evil, trying to do the same to everybody. Now, the final column over to the right, we aren't going to get into a lot of it today, but it is your accountability. You can project 5 years of income. Where are we going to grow? Which strategy? And then that's produced into this year's strategy, the annual projected income, your budget. Then you make a calendar out of that. Then when you are, we're going to go a little bit into, so how do you report that and analyze it? Then you're going to evaluate that strategy. Did that work? Did that special event work for major donors? Did that direct mail work? And then you put that all together, you evaluate it and put it in a written plan. And so that in general is everything in planning your development strategy, looking at relationships at the core. Any quick question, Andrew?
This is great. And for the students who are looking at this, this is a rough outline of the process we're going to be using in the course. Some of the arrows may be in a little bit different order. And we're going to go a little bit more into activities than is shown here. But this is the basic, diagram that we're going to be following in the course. So thanks, John.
All right, now we'll go into some details. I said relationships. You may or may not have heard of the donor pyramid, but basically it's the numerical numbers of donors at each level. And every nonprofit, whether it's a church, a nonprofit organization, a faith-based organization, your donor base creates a pyramid. Now, you may be one that deals with direct mail mostly. Well, guess what? Then you have more impulse donors, and the top of your donors is real narrow. So this depicts what would be a balanced donor strategy with your top major donors at the top of the donor pyramid. They are smaller in number, but more in dollars. Your monthly donors are now in your next group. These are the people that, again, they're budget conscious. Well, let me back up a minute. I think I'll do a little more explanation in this slide. Major donors, I generally define as giving $1,000 or more per calendar year. I say calendar year, not fiscal year, because donors think in calendar year. Major donors historically give mostly at the end of the year. They make pledges during the year, and then they give in November, December. So they would remember last year what they gave you. Now, also, let's see, the other thing I was going to say about major donors is they're not impulsive. They plan. Maybe they own their own business. They've been successful. They're giving away bigger dollars. They may ask more questions. They may ask for more of a case for support, which we'll get to. And so that's your major donors. You have to deal with them one-to-one. Now, you may send all your major donors a letter, but they still would be personalized, okay? That's opposed to a letter to all your impulse donors. Let's say you have 20,000 of them, you send them all the same letter, okay? In between those, we have what are the monthly donors. And I worked in this when I worked in an inner city mission, and I saw all these faithful givers. So we created a program. It happened to be called the 99 and 1 Club, based on the scripture. If you had 100 sheep and one left, one was lost, you would leave the 99, find that one lost sheep. So the idea was these monthly partners were so critical. And I use the example my wife and I gave to an inner city youth ministry, dealt with street kids and everything. We gave monthly for 17 years. So the idea is not that you want monthly. The idea is that that's their way of giving. They budget. They're conservative in terms of using their funds wisely. They don't want little trinkets sent to them. I'm sorry, it may sound disrespectful, but I don't send them Jesus junk. In other words, they're aware of every dollar. If it's $20 a month, $50 a month, I had some all the way up to $1,000 a month. They're aware that you need to spend that wisely. Okay, so those are monthly donors. Impulse donors, they respond to direct mail and special events. Why? Because they don't plan. They don't say, gee, dear, let's, in our giving this year, respond to the direct mail in April and July and November. No, they don't think that way. That's why the critical issue for impulse donors is frequency. That's why people, when you understand impulse donors, you would send them frequent reminders. But some people get upset and said, oh, you sent them too much mail. We need to cut out the mail. Well, that would work for major donors and monthly partners. They shouldn't get all that mail because they've already made a commitment to you. But if you stop your communication to impulse donors, you're basically going to forget about them and they're going to give to somebody else. So you are not offending impulse donors if you send them a monthly appeal. Because there are certain organizations like feeding programs, like children's programs, like rescue missions, they are receiving donor gifts every day. And that's what impulse donors are. And then the other one are new donors. What do we have to do to help them make that psychological leap from thinking good thoughts about your organization to actually writing a check? And that's a lot of thinking. It's part art and science. It's finding the names and those kind of things. All
So,
right.
yeah,
Go ahead.
John, I have a question, especially on that last part,
Okay.
because I think a lot of organizations understand, okay, if you have a big list and, you can start to work people, through the list and how to treat the different groups. And, but how do you build the list? How do you get more new donors?
All right. That is a difficult
And
task.
so there's two levels of that. One is people who are on your list but not giving, and then
Right.
the other is people who aren't on your list. So
Right.
so let me reword it. What are the main sources for new donors for most organizations you work with?
All right.
Is this volunteering? Is this where are they getting these new donors?
Okay. On your lists of most medium to large organizations where you have in the 10, 20, 50, 100,000 names, there will always be a percentage that are these first three groups: major donors, monthly donors, impulse donors. Then what you have are lapsed donors, meaning they gave at some time in the past, or non-donors. Somehow you've gotten their name, but they've never given to you. So maybe they came to a concert, or came to an event, or they came to something, or through your board member, somebody, you got their name. Okay, in the old days, and I do mean old days, we used to get church directories of names. Not anymore, not for about 15, 20 years now. You wouldn't even think of giving those names to a nonprofit. But there are different ways. You go and speak to a church. All right, so that's about the ones that are on your list. And how do you get them activated?
Well, let's talk more of the on your list. So
That's what I'm going to say.
okay,
The
yeah, sorry.
lapsed donors are on your list, and they gave it. Let's say we're looking at fall of 2020. So you might consider people who gave in 2019 and 2018, even though they haven't given in those, they're still recent. But to consider lapsed donors, you may say, oh, they haven't given in 2000 since 2017 or before.
Well, let me talk about the case. So let's say a ministry's only been around for a couple years, and they have an email list and a mailing list of 500 people.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay, yeah. And how do you grow that list is what I'm getting at.
I'm just doing the lapsed donors because, again, the lapsed donors are a higher percentage of reactivating than it is those other names that have never given. So I'm taking them in sequence, Andrew.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
The ones that are lapsed had a previous relationship. So your goal is to try and provoke them with some type of project to get them to give a single gift again. Now, the other names that Andrew's talking about, let's say you have 20,000 names, but 10,000 of them or 7,000 of them or 5,000 of them have never given a gift.
I'm saying a new organization. Say someone's just starting. Say you have 0 names. How are
Okay.
they going to build that? Let's
All
start
right.
with the most simple. They have 0 names, and how are
All
they
right.
going to build that list?
Okay. I was going to come to that second. Can I go
Okay,
ahead?
sorry. Yeah. That's fine.
I'm sorry. We're working this out,
Okay,
folks, because there's
gotcha.
so many questions about new donors.
Yep.
So I'm saying now the best time to activate a donor to be a name to become a donor is in the fall. Generally, October, November are the best times to get to give a gift. So in your lapsed and non-donors on your list, you would write to them in October, November, asking them for a gift. All right, so those are the ones on your list. Now let's go to, you're a brand new organization. What are the ways that you can find new names? Because remember, they're names before they're donors. And you have to think of it that way. Okay, let's go through that. What we found, I've got a slide coming up about the donor relationship, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But in this slide, I'm going to actually say what the newest trend is. The newest trend is, rather than starting as an impulse donor and moving up to the top, it really is coming in parallel. In other words, major donors who give over $1,000 they're going to run in the circles with other major donors. So if you're going to ask them to help you with some new names, you might have an event at their home. I've had events with major donors where they could fit 20 cars in their driveway. Okay, so all those people that come are an acquirement of new names that are most likely at the major donor level. That's a small donor event, okay? Now, if you have an annual event like a banquet or this or that kind of event, it is always helpful to go to your regular donors who come to that and say, if there's a table of 8 and you and your spouse are coming, would you fill the other 3 couples with people who have never been to our event? So you get your faithful donors to try and invite other people to the table, in which case at the event we'll ask them to come on our mailing list, or we get their name before with having tickets or something. The next way is going to be through your staff and board, is asking them to bring people to an event or to include in a startup mailing if you're in a startup situation. Now, the most, how do I say this? The most fruitful, but also the most expensive, but also the hard to do at startup, is to rent a list of names. There are brokers all over the place who will rent you names for a one-time use. And that's the donor acquisition season. When I worked at a mission in a major city, we would we would rent 600,000 names in this city. Now, none of these are merged and purged, so none of these are currently on our list. And we could send them one appeal. You only rent the names for one use. And the response rates back when I was doing it was around 3 to 4%. In other words, we made money. But the acquisition today in the mail is 1 to 2%. So you basically, when you rent a list and start out by renting names and the broker helps you choose which names, you break even. The real goal is to get those names on your mailing list. Now, those are the basics of how to start a list. Andrew, did you have another specific question on it?
That's extremely helpful. So if someone wanted to Google, renting a list of names, what would they Google? What's the term that they would be looking for?
It would be direct mail brokers or name acquisition brokers. And there's a number of them.
For fundraising, probably, right?
What's that?
For fundraising?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
do you just do a general one?
Well, there's different things. The majority of those brokers are going to get you names off of magazine sales. Now,
Okay.
magazine sales have really changed, so I have not mentioned how to use social media.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in that, but when you look at new names, you can look at the GoFundMe's, you can look at the Facebooks, you can look at any of those things where someone will give you their name. Now, the problem with that is they're giving you their online name, which we find changes faster than mailing addresses used to
Right.
change back in the day. So you have to find a way to get their online name turn into an actual address and a
Right.
person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm much more familiar with a lot of the impulse campaigns, Giving Tuesday, and we have this current crisis that we're going to try to address on Facebook or things like that. So,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that seems like that's a reasonable support. I mean, a reasonable approach too. So,
Well,
okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's
here's the
helpful.
thing to remember. If the major donor is a scoped sniper rifle, the impulse and new donors are shotguns.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know, so you're focusing on donors right up there, but when you do new donors and you rent, let's say you rent 10,000 names and you get 1%, so what's that, 100 names?
Yep.
You know, yeah, you may say, oh boy, that's not many, but you have to do it year after year. And sometimes we used to do it in Easter. Some brokers are advising doing it more times a year. So there's different times, but remember the psychology. You're trying to get someone who may know a little of your name, or they
Right.
may know a lot about you, or like the group I started with, they may already be on your list to get your newsletter, but
Yep.
they've never given a gift. So there's different psychological hurdles to become a member of your giving family.
Right. Yeah. And one thing I just want to throw in, I'd ask you this in advance, but you said, and this obviously varies based on organization, but a rough estimate for an organization is that 10% of the donors might be major donors, 20% monthly, 30 to 40% impulse donors, and then 30 to 40% lapsed.
That's if you're balanced.
Yeah, yeah, if
That's
you're
if
balanced,
you're
and
balanced.
some are going to be different, obviously. But
Yeah,
I think it's
depends
just
how you
helpful
start
for
out.
organizations to think through, like, okay, where should I be doing a better job to a certain extent?
And
Because you
we'll
want
be
to try to
talking about
convert.
that.
I mean, part of the reason why people convert, try to get a lot of people on the monthly donors, is impulse donors. There's an expense for every time you're getting them to give. But if someone's put you on their, every monthly, their bank's going to send you a check or something like that, or it's automatically happening through their credit card, there's no expense to keep
Right.
that going. You just need to be communicating with them to maintain the relationship. Whereas impulse donors, you might have to pay to reacquire them
Well, let me
more.
add something
So,
to that, and it's called the giving curve. When we start, let's say we're starting at September. September through December is the highest giving in nonprofits across the board, churches, nonprofits. Then January, February, it starts to level out and go down. And you then get to May, June, July, August, you're at the lowest curve. You are generally losing money if you do too many appeals in June, July, August. So you need to, and that's part of getting into the details of direct mail, when to send out a direct mail appeal that gets the highest percentage. But at the same time, if you got a good monthly partner program, that's giving you the June, July financial stability that the impulse donors won't give you.
yeah,
Now, let me give another scenario. Let's say you got some major donors. All right, you got really blessed with some people, maybe high tech or a business, and you came in with some really big major donors. You must begin to broaden your base, because one $25,000 donor that they give you every December, if they suddenly say, I can't do that this year, that's a lot of impulse donors to make up that $25,000. So
right.
it's real important to look for a balanced donor pyramid.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. All right. I've asked a ton of questions on that one, but I'm going to let you jump into your other slide. So
All
thanks,
right, here
John.
we go. Now, you've had already some study on what is the case for support. As you noted in my development strategic plan, um, we had the 5-year plan and the 1-year plan. So this we're going to stick with as the 1-year plan, but I came up with this for a capital campaign. Now, I'm not sure where you are in your studies, but annual or let me just do this quick definition. Current giving or annual giving is every month, every year, and it continues forever. Capital campaign is usually a 3 to 5 year project where you're only raising funds till you hit the goal and then it's over. Planned giving is where people leave you in their wills and other instruments to leave a legacy of what they believe in with your organization, what you believe in, okay? So we are now going to talk about the case for support for the annual fund, which is your mission and vision. What are we doing? Why are we opening the doors? Now, as you can see in the green on the left, those are all the rationale for a rescue mission, an inner city rescue mission that deals with homelessness, hunger, addiction recovery, and transition. All right. So I'm going to go through briefly how I determine the boxes in the middle, which is what you'll be writing. The need is, what did God call you to do? What is the need? It's not the money. That's not the need. It's not the finances. It is, how are you touching people? To the right, it says, what's the heart of the problem? And it lists some things: family breakdown, addiction, economy, homelessness. To me, the goal of writing the need is to grab the donor's heart and break it. In other words, break their heart with the heart of the problem. So they say, oh my gosh, is there anything that can be done? Remember, folks, students, giving is a heart issue. It may be logical to some people, but they add up and they feel good about giving. Giving is from the heart. So you have to grab their heart. And they say, is there any hope for a solution? You say, yes. We've been given a solution to this need. We have cutting edge strategies, and we have a proven program. And this is where I say the power of God comes in. This is where, when you are working with children or medical, where the power of God through Jesus Christ goes through each worker, that's where you bring in your faith, is under the solution. We aren't just doing this because, oh, wow, we can make money and do something as a nonprofit. No, we believe that God has brought us to touch people's lives with what he's entrusted us with. Could be a Christian school, could be a Christian camp, could be any of these faith-based things. But, you know, when you deal with an addicted person, that's when God uses you. When you deal with a child from the inner city at the camp and they accept Christ at the Thursday night fireside, that's the power of Christ. So that's your solution. Then you say, well, what do you do? Well, we've proven success. Here are our programs, all that we have done, and why we are the best to solve the problem. So these are our programs. It might be programs A for men, programs B for women, and program C for children. Excuse me. Now we look at, okay, the first 3 boxes are critical to write. Now you say, well, what do you want from me? Now, in a capital campaign, we go to the campaign, but this for the annual fund would say the annual fund, where it says the campaign. And this is what we're thinking for this year. Let's say our budget is $1.2 million. Okay, that's our budget. And our overall strategy, let's say we're a Christian camp, we're going to do this many camps and this many campers and this many adult things. So you outline from your program what it will cost. And then you say, well, what are you asking of us? Now, if this is a major donor, you may be asking them for a specific amount. You may say, we'd like to ask for $10,000 or whatever. And that is well thought out, the project description. Or you may say, oh, we need a new bus. All right, the bus costs, I don't know what a bus costs, let's say $75,000. And you might put a giving tree, and we're going to show you what that is, for how to raise $75,000, and we need 1 gift of $25,000, 2 gifts of $10,000, etc. So that's the project description. Then the final 2 things are historical highlights and our administration references. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they put those 2 things at the start and say, hey, look at us, we're so great, here's why you should give us money. That should be the last 2 things you do. Very quickly, in a foundation grant book, if you use that as an example as a major donor, what is the first thing they write? They write, this is our name, these are our board of directors, and this is what we give to. That's the need. So you're going to say, the first thing you want to say, this is what we've been called to do. Does that touch your heart? Like to a major donor, like to a foundation. That's why foundations that see the historical highlights in administration first, they say, you're not even listening to what we give to. Okay, just a quick aside on that. So that's the case for support. Now, it may look like a lot, but I just do like one page of the first three boxes. Maybe you might have a couple pages of the need or something. And then the campaign is one page. The project might be one page. Historical highlights could be a couple pages depending, but I just list the year you were founded, new executive director, added this program, just real simple historical highlights. And then the administration references is, do you belong to a group of rescue missions? Do you belong to a group of Christian schools? Do you belong to the Better Business Bureau? I list all those things that you are memberships of to show your stability and show your community mindedness. Okay. So, Andrew, anything you wanted to bring out?
Yeah, I'm just going to comment. I think the book goes over the case for support, but I think, John, what you're really presenting is the book gives you the facts about the case for support. What you're really communicating is the heart. And to me, I've done tons of grant writing, and this is a little bit different order than how most grants are. Often most grants will start with history and organization, but this order makes sense if you're looking at it from the how do you move someone's heart. What you're doing is you're saying the need is the thing that's closest to their heart, not even your solution to the need, it's the need, right? So
Right.
and then you get more and more to the thinking of like, okay, and here are the seals of approval that you have on, and the thinking comes in there at some point, right? But
Well,
you
there's
lead
logic to
with the
this, I
heart.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that if people understand that, and they understand that it's not just you have the facts, it's you're trying to be persuasive, I think that really helps. So
Yeah, and I
okay.
want to just say one more thing to tie it into City Vision University. We're about the widow and the orphan. We're about the poor. We're about the people that Jesus said, the children, bring them to me. So to really know that this way of doing it, really, it's for the steward to understand that we believe we're doing things in all our ministries that really breaks Jesus' heart.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, yeah, you can keep going.
All right. Now, this is a very simple thing, but sometimes we overlook it. And we're talking now of more of a one-to-one relationship, okay? And it is the whole idea. First, you identify who the person is, and then next, you gather information. Where are they in the community? Other things they, have done. Do they go to your church? Whatever. Children's age business. Then you find out what they're interested in. Have they volunteered before? Have they this? Have they that? They generally give to, excuse me, medical things, or they give to uh, um, education, different kinds of categories. And then you try and get them involved. And you say, well, sometimes we want people to come to our boards, or we have a subcommittee, an advisory committee, or something where we get to know them, or different kinds of things. They may chair a table at our banquet or those kind of things. Then when we've seen these things, we learned about them, we can invite them to invest. The biggest mistake I've found is arrogance on the part of Christian leaders. And that is, we've identified something, we've done God's work, let's ask them for money. And we go right from identification to investment. And we assume we know this person. And we assume all that just because we're doing God's work, of course they're going to give us money. And there were some years where that arrogance really hurt us in our Christian leadership, in our nonprofits, even in our churches. So to me, it's the result of a lack of stewardship education all the way back to seminary. But the point is, this is about the donor. This is about connecting them. This is about finding out how God is leading them. Okay, next one.
Yeah, let me ask some questions on this one. So, honestly, I think this is a really good point, and it's one that I need to think about. And a lot of this gets down to intuitively, when someone is ready. But on the information and in assessing their interest, how much of this are you doing with like databases versus having a conversation with them, or maybe if they're introduced to you by a friend, their friends? How are you determining that?
Oh, wonderful consultant's answer. It depends.
Well, tell me some examples. It's a
I know. I
yeah,
will, Andrew. I just have to give consultants answers. But the point is, if it's a major donor, that will define the strategy of how you do it. If it's a direct mail donor or monthly partner, there might be a different way you do
yeah.
that.
Let's assume major donor in this
All
case.
right. What I'm going to do is postpone your question to one of my future slides that I'll answer that question. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I'm going to go into more detail in a future one. Let me see where
Okay.
it's this one's. No, well, no, I'll be back. Yeah. All
Okay.
right. Was this the next one? Yeah. All right. So this is just, if you think of the donor pyramid, this is one half of it. That's the only reason for creating this, is to understand, if someone is brand new to your organization, do you have a welcome packet? Do you have something you can say, hey, I see this is your first gift. We're going to send you our newsletter. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. This is how can we pray for you? You can pray for us. Now, in sophisticated professional direct mail strategies, they will start an intro series of their top 3 appeals. If they give a second gift, yes, they go into the appeals group to start to get appeals on a regular basis. If after 3 of their best appeals, they don't give another gift, they go into the newsletter only. This is a way to prevent wasting money on all kinds of appeals if the people haven't given when you've asked them basically 4 times. So then from there, if they're responding to appeals, maybe they give, you look at what's called frequency, maybe they give 2.5 gifts a year. Okay. Well, you could say to them, wait a minute, I'll just back up. Maybe they give 6, 7, 8 gifts a year. There are people that do that. They give every time they get a letter, and then they get the receipt, and they send in another gift with the response device, or the receipt, I should say. That's one. What we do is we do an invitation series, and it's a full strategy, and it's my book, The Monthly Partner, to invite them to become a monthly partner. If they're giving 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times a year, it's not that big a jump for them to say, if we make it easy for you, like you said, Andrew, now I'll show my age. When we first did this, we mailed them reminders. Well, we don't do that anymore. It's either digitally, or it's bank automatic. What is that? ACH, or et cetera, et cetera. But it's automatic that you're going to be getting gifts from them every month, and it will be multiple years. If you find people are giving anything over $83.33, guess what? They're a major donor. That's over $1,000 a year. I think I did my math right.
Yeah,
So
probably.
in other words, if you have someone give you $100 a month, $150 a month, this is not rare, folks. And they give that to you. They're a major donor. So how do you deal with them? Do you treat them as a monthly partner? Do you treat them as a major donor? Here comes the consulting answer, Andrew. It depends. What you do is you get to know them. You may find someone who owns a company, is really wealthy, but through their family giving, they're doing $150 a month to help the homeless or sponsor a child in a ministry. Now, they may give you that $100 a month, but their company might be giving you $5,000 every December. You see, you might have the same family, but have different motivations. So what do? You ask them. You call them and you say, hi, you're doing the monthly. We're so thankful you're part of this. And then occasionally give this gift. How can we best communicate with you what we're doing and how your gifts are being used? I have a whole process that I get board members involved in and talking to donors where it's not an ask, it's a question of how are we doing and da da da, and the people love it. They love to talk to you and say things and say, well, this is what we prefer, and it works really well. So this is just a donor relationship ladder, and again, this goes against what's the big evil? One size does not fit all. So this shows you you can't do the same thing with everybody. Okay? All right. Now we'll go to this one. Now, this is a major donor process chart. And I had a friend of mine who I helped him start his ministry, and it was with families, and he was a former football player, so everybody wanted to talk to him. Year 2, 3, 4, 5, everybody. And he said, John, do I have to ask for money every time I meet with someone? I said, no. And I created this chart. So I was a full-time major donor rep for a Christian university. So I was out in the road and, talking, and I had a list of 100, 125 names. This is a major donor rep. Some of them have up to 150, 200 names. All right, so this is a way to process your work with your major donors. First of all, you see the square major donor prospect. Prospect being the key word. They are not on your list. They've not given to you. As opposed to major donor in there in the middle, they are your current major donors. They have been, they may have been the last 2 or 3, 4 years, but they're on your list. So let's go back. You're planning to go meet with someone or call them on the phone or an email. What's your topic? What do you talk about? Do you have to ask them for money? I say no. Get acquainted. Ask them questions. Fill them in an organizational info. Things that it's important. Again, if they're a major donor, they may want to know, well, who's on your board? Well, what's your annual budget? Well, what's your percentage of fundraising? They may be more informed than a direct mail donor who gives you approximately, 10 to 12 seconds opening the mail before they're going to respond. Okay, so very different mindset with a major donor. And then the other thing is find out information from them. What are, I see Bill, you were introduced to me by Andrew. How do you know Andrew? And we're a nonprofit here and work with many people. What are some of the, if you think this is appropriate, what are some of the causes that your heart goes to that you maybe support? Those are any kind of questions. So there, Andrew, is your question for new donors. How do we know what to say? It's these kind of things. Come prepared. You don't have to ask for money in the first time you talk to them. Get acquainted, find out about them, and let them know some important things about your ministry. So that goes back to what do we do with to acquire a new donor? This would be how, now this could be at a lunch meeting, this could be at a phone call, this could be at a special event, this could be dropping by their office, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, let's go to the major donor. Here's all the things you can talk about. And again, it's important. There might be let me just say this about major donors. They're eccentric, okay? They can say, I'm going to give you every November. They can say, I want you to call me every year on my birthday. Or they can say, I only want you to come and meet with me when the moon is full and wear a blue dress. And that only works for some of us. But that's my other consultant funny joke that I usually. But the point is that you never know until you try. I was teaching a major donor course, and a couple, they're retired and they had done well, so they were ambassadors for the Christian university, and they told a story of coming out and they didn't get the gift. And she said, "What do? We failed." And how do we deal with our failure? And I said, well, you didn't fail. Tell me what you learned. What did you learn that he gives to? He doesn't give to you. So what did you talk? You have to look at this as relationships. Right. Now, thank you and appreciation. It's sometimes said that you should thank a donor 8 times for every gift. But one of them that's very big, January through March, is thanking major donors who made their major gift in Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? Maybe they bailed you out at an end of the year. So what are you going to do? You're going to say, thank you. You were there for us. We got hit with the COVID-19. I have a Christian university that has had to end their students and send them home. And they have been getting so many gifts, they're over budget.
Yeah.
So we talked about how we've been working for many years on their donor base and everything, and a very, very faithful group of people. And so we're saying we've got to thank them now for getting us through not only the end of COVID, but into the fall so the students can come back and we can start. Now, I take an appreciation gift. I'm going to spend a little time on this. I love these little booklets that were like God's wisdom for business success or God's wisdom for mothers. And there are different things. Maybe those are out of, not popular anymore. But, you want to get something useful like, I had a group, they're all women, and they wanted to give plants. Said, okay, but I'm not sure the men are going to appreciate plants as much. Then there are pens, then there are other things. And I'm not being sexist in it, but I'm just saying, make sure you know your donor. And my counsel was to have 3 or 4 books, because books are always a great gift, that's my opinion. But you might have one that's good for men, good for women, and good for a family or a business or whatever. And these can be devotionals. These can be, there's some great stewardship books of people who have succeeded at stewardship and stuff, and those are great books. All right, now that's just one other. The other is Vision for Future Ministry with a proposal, a sponsor opportunity for a project we're trying to fund, a new project, okay? And you take to them, hey, I'm just going to 5 different people. This is a new project we're trying to do, an outreach. Now, I'm going to then talk about the annual project and the general needs, better known as the budget, better known as the general fund, better known as no man's land. No one wants to give to it. All right, I'm going to try not to take too much time in this, Andrew, but I'll just tell you this. Don't use an accountant's format for showing your annual budget costs to a prospective donor. Put it into a pie chart that shows areas of ministry. Let's make it easy. You have $1 million budget. You have ministry A, ministry B, ministry C, and ministry D. Ministry A is 50%. Ministry B is 20%. Ministry C is 5%. And 5%, 5%.
Right.
Okay, you're $1 million. So now you say 50% is going to be 500,000. You write that down. 20% is 200,000. Then 5,000, 5,000, whatever it amounts to $1 million. Now, what are you showing them? First of all, you're educating them about your program. What do we do? Here's our 5 main areas of ministry. Number 2, you're telling them of the percentage of all the work we do. Here's the percentage on A program, B program. And then it follows, how much do we have to raise every year to do that ministry? Well, it's 500,000 for our primary A, B is 200,000, and then I guess it'd be 50,000, 50,000, 50,000. Right. So you get what I'm saying. Don't use an accountant spreadsheet. Don't use a chart of accounts. Use a pie chart that shows every year what the annual fund is broken into, and you will have much more informed donors. All right, last one.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay, I have given that and a lot of church financial guys in a church presentation where I say, rather than the number one thing on church budgets is salaries, and it gets everybody upset, break it into areas of ministry, worship ministries, Christian education, whatever, and then youth and blah, blah, blah. And then you do the same thing, percentage in dollars, and you break out the salaries of your pastors into the worship areas they work. So you're not looking at someone's salaries, you're looking at the areas of what percentage of their time they're putting into ministry. And I tell you, I've had some financial people in churches just think this was just a light bulb because they didn't have to deal with the chart of accounts. They dealt with ministries, and that's what they communicated.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helpful to all of you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
All right. Now, quick sip of liquid. This is an internal management system. It's not rocket science. It doesn't have to be just this way, but this gives structure to how do we track relationships. Number one, you receive a name. All right. Anyway, here's a business card at lunch. Here's this. They came to our event. Now, pardon my age, but you set up a prospect file in the old days was in the filing cabinet, but this is on computer on your databases. However, my younger friends, you still want to track some things by paper. You might want to file. Maybe there's something in the news. Well, here we go, newspaper. But where are you going to keep information that you learn about that donor? I'll show you how old I am. I went to the major University of Washington research department 35 years ago, and they had 3 or 4 people down in the dungeons actually reading newspapers and magazines every day for any notice of any graduate alumni of the University of Washington, a major university in Seattle. That's how they used to do it, going through plot books of who owned property and all that stuff. Now you can find all that information in a service, but you have a file. So now box 3 is research the prospect. Well, I gave you some ideas on how to do that. Call them up, ask them questions, send them a survey, different things. Now then you rate them. Now I'm going to hold off on rating because I have a form that I'm going to show you how to rate them. But it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in a capital campaign, you might assign this person to the relationship or solicitor. I don't like the word solicitor, but it would be the person. Like say you had the executive director, you would give him or her the top 10 donors maybe. And maybe the head of the program might have 5 prospects, and you as developed might have 25. Okay, so you assign them. Now, the solicitor reads a prospect packet. What's a prospect packet? Well, we're not spending much time on the marketing materials here today, and I don't know if, Andrew, you are in the course, but basically you have a folder, the written proposal, also known as the case for support, a cover letter with the ask, and then some materials of a newsletter. Now, that's an actual physical packet you take. However, in my later days of consulting, when I had spent lots of money on printed materials for binding and all my wonderful proposals to impress people, now it's strictly a cover sheet with some logo and your proposal and some backup, and you email it all to them. But, you still can take something in your hand. Why? Because major donors are going to want to look at it. They're going to want to take it home to their family. They might share it at a board meeting. So the idea of having something physical is still a good idea. All right. Then you make your presentation. All right. You go to them, you're going to ask them, it might be a thank you. It might be, a thank you with a report of what they invested in the project, whatever. It might be that pie chart about the annual fund. After you come back, you do what's called a contact report. Now, I didn't include one, but I think there's one in the book. And it's simple. The name, where'd you go, the address you went to see them, what's the location, what did you talk about, and did you ask them for anything? And then here's the most important thing, and this works in a database. There's different names for it in the database, but it's basically what's the next action step. Do I call them in 6 months? Do I call them in November? Do I contact them in a week to follow up on this proposal? I'm going to send them that book we talked about. I learned this about his family. Okay, so this is where computer databases are their weight in gold, is that they will then remind you, because you can't remember everything about 150 donors, major donors. You can't. All right, then you update their file, the contact report. If there's a gift or a pledge, that has to go to the accounting department, because remember, we put pledges into our database, but they only put it when it's a cash gift in accounting. So we have to make our pledges and gifts reconcile with the accounting department when it's actual fulfillment of a pledge. Then you might send them a thank you note, and then the results go to the prospect list, which we're going to talk about. All right, so that's the administrative undergirding of working with all these names. You can't remember it all in your heads, folks. Don't try. You can make a simpler system than this, cut out a couple boxes, that's fine. Maybe you have a really good database, that's fine, but don't try and remember everything yourself.
John, what are some of the donor management systems that you've, just names off the top of your head, that you've heard of that some of your
Oh,
clients have worked with?
Andrew, I usually avoid this question for fear of being partial, because I know so many of these, but I have to tell you, some of mine are dead and gone. That
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I did a search in 1989 and came up with Fundmaster back then.
Right.
But there is the good ones been around are Donor Perfect. Jay Love did Bloomerang, I think it's called.
Yeah, yeah,
And what you want, folks, don't buy any system now that you have to pay exorbitant amounts of money each year. You want to get what's called a browser-based system. You don't want to have to update the software and do all that stuff. You want it all in your browser. Now, here's the thing, my faith-based friends. They will have your names and lists on their server. In the early days, that upset all our Christians that thought they were going to steal names, but they don't steal names. They take care of all the updates. They take care of all the problems
right.
because it's on site with them. So anyway, I tell you what, the place to find it would be, again, Google.
Yeah, yeah, we could help people search, but I just wanted,
Yeah,
practical examples. And I know a number of small nonprofits will use Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce, they have a free nonprofit edition, but
yeah, and so
it
did
isn't as
QuickBooks.
customized. Yeah,
QuickBooks
so
had a free overlay, and I liked it for a while. But here's the other thing, and I'm trying to remember them. Gosh, I'm sorry, some memory things. But there were some that if you had 500 names or less, it was free.
yeah,
And the person that did a lot of this development was Jay Love. He
yeah.
he developed Fundmaster. Then he was the first one to do the browser based, and now he's kind of retired it, but he put out Bloomerang.
Yeah, Bloomerang actually puts out more content, and we actually use a good amount of their content in our course. They put out more free content than any other provider, which tells me they're probably doing pretty well right now. So
Yeah, and Jay Love is on the network of donor, what is it, Instagram and
yeah,
fun, so Facebook and things.
right.
So he's still in the information sharing,
Yeah,
so you can
okay.
ask him too. And the
Uh,
one final source, there used to be a magazine called Fundraising Management. I
yeah,
don't know if it's still going, but every year they did a review of the top 25 to 50 software database packages.
okay. All right. Well, I'll let you keep going because I know we have a number of slides, and yeah,
All right.
so we can go through this.
Here's the rating report. Okay, it says major donor summary report, but I think I made an error with that because I'm not summarizing. This is the list. Let's say I'm the director of development, Andrew, you're the executive director, and we're going to look at your names. So under 1 through 10, we have 10 donor prospects. Okay. Now, the rating, sorry about that G there, hanging there. The rating would be, excuse me, do we know the area or amount they're going to give? Now, let's say they gave $50,000 2 years ago. All right, so we have that down as a history of that. Now, I'm going to come back to readiness. The focus of giving might be they love giving to program A, or they love giving to children, or they love giving to this. You might not know that, but we might know that. We put it down. The purpose of the contact would be an annual update. If they're the kind we talk to every year, it might be a first time presentation. All right, now let's go back to readiness. And there's 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now you look at the bottom. Number 1 means they're ready to be solicited, meaning asked for a gift. Very clear. Number 2, needs some cultivation. 3, needs much cultivation. 4, capable, interest unknown. So let's go through these. So if this person, Joe Smith, excuse me, he's given every year, he sits at our table at the banquet, he says, Andrew, whenever you need something, make sure you talk to me first. He's a 1. He's a 1 because he said to us, he's shown his giving, he's told you, hey, I'm ready to give. So those are the ones that are 1s. They know about our ministry, they know we're in need, they've said different things, and those would be ones that you would put under readiness. They're a 1. Now a 2, this is 2 and 3 have a lot of variables. It could be that they're a donor if they're 2, but it could be just smaller impulse donors. It could be that we know that they have some wealth. And I say this without being callous, but they've got the new Mercedes every year at church. We know they've made bigger gifts here, different things, but we don't think they know about our maybe we've got an aggressive plan to grow. Or like in a capital campaign, you're going to add a new building or something in your annual fund. So they may need some updating. They may need some, hey, you know what, Andrew, let's you and I have lunch with them and just find out where they're at. So a 2 means over on the right, see where it says letter, phone, a tour of our building, a proposal, other, invite them to become a board member. So these are some of the cultivation strategies. So if someone's a 2, we have to decide what we're going to do. Are we going to make it 2? Let's give them a tour of the facility, but it's going to be future when we ask them. Now a 3 is someone that might know about our ministry, but otherwise knows nothing about us. Okay. They might be a Christian in the community. They might be a Christian in the country if you're a regional or national ministry. Number 4 is what we call our Bill Gates. Number 4 is, they have the money, but they have no clue who we are. Okay, by going through these 10, maybe you don't know if they've given 5,000, 1,000, but it might be we'll start with 1,000 or some. Then you have the rating and what they give to. Let's say Mr. Smith, his wife, always likes to give to the children. Or, if you have a cancer wing in your hospital, these kind of things. So then you rate them. Now, here's what you do. You change by being an Excel spreadsheet. You go by the readiness column, put the 1s first, the 2s second, the 3s next, and the 4s at the bottom. What have you just done? You've given yourself a plan of attack. I'm going to call the ones who are most likely to give first, and I'm going to spend more time with the 1s and 2s than I am with the 3s and 4s. Why? Because the 3s and 4s are not necessarily going to give right now. It's going to be a longer term cultivation. All right, so that's a brief discussion of this tool as you look at actual names and start to put the strategy down. Andrew.
Yeah, this is very helpful. I imagine some of the better donor management systems could have something like this built in, but just showing a basic spreadsheet, I think, is really good. So, yeah,
yes.
Thanks.
Now, remember, I'm old and came from before. So when I was working with these on the airplanes going home, I was trying to find a logic that was basic and not overkill.
Right.
So this is the step as you go rating, readiness, doom, doom. And I do it a little different for campaigns. However, 2 things. Your database may do this where it does 75 to 90% of this, but not all of it.
Yeah, and the reality is, if this is going to determine, as you talked about, a major donor officer who might meet with 150 people, it's more important that your list is accurate and is sorting the way you want it to than that you put it in some sort of donor management system. So sometimes simpler is better.
And now I'm going to say the opposite point. If you get 75 to 90% of it right using your database, do that, and then by hand you're going to fill in these other things, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, that's a good point.
So it's one of those things that most of the databases allow you to not only do what are their standard report, but they allow you to adjust as well and create your own reports. So the better you get at that, the more you can make this. Because, well, let me just say, in a capital campaign, I'm in a room with 15 to 20 leaders of the community to help us look at the major donor, the lead gifts. I'm going to take the computer printout and I'm going to put it into this format. Why? Because I don't want different types of business people trying to figure out a database report. I want them to
Right.
see something like Excel spreadsheets that they can see very clearly, very
Yeah.
quickly. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.